Hello and welcome to Rugby World Cup 2023 reaction brought to you by DrivingMaul. Hi, I'm Paul, the guy behind DrivingMaul, and as we all know by now, France have won the right to host the 2023 Rugby World Cup, and that has caused an awful lot of controversy from both the Irish and the South African camps, and a lot of fans as well. So, what have been the problems? I mean, one of the big ones that's been said is that this has been basically a vote for money. France were the ones that offered up the most guaranteed cash for hosting the Rugby World Cup to World Rugby, so that World Rugby can then reinvest that to grow the game. So one of the things, so people said, yeah, it's just a play for cash. At which point, if you think about it, a lot of people are also saying, as been pointed out by quite a few commentators, that a lot of people are saying that World Rugby should be funding the Tier 2 nations more. Now, if they're going to be funding the Tier 2 nations more, they need to get the money from somewhere. So, it's about a matter of having your cake and eating it kind of thing, is what they're trying to say is, you either have to chase the money so you can spend the money, or if you don't chase money, you can't spend the money. So it's a little bit unfair on that accusation. The other point that's come out is that World Rugby spent a bunch of cash on getting an independent review of the three bids and then coming up with a recommendation and a big lengthy report as well. Now, a lot of people have said how independent was that, and we can go around in circles but on that one. But I think one of the things World Rugby is trying to do is it's trying to place itself as the premier rugby administration and showing people how it should be done. And I think if you're going to set up a process where you have an independent review that comes up with a recommendation, then you should be following that recommendation. Maybe you can have a period for questioning that recommendation and put challenges into place. But in the end, I think it should be a rubber stamping of that. If you are, and whether they got the categories right, whether the decision that came out of that recommendation was right, is a different matter. But I think if they're going to set up a process, what the process should have been is you define how you score a bid, and all the bids know that beforehand. You then have the bids scored against that by an independent group. You come up with a recommendation. Each bid can then challenge in those pieces, and it can be questioned. You then re-recommend after that, and it should get rubber stamped. That's the process it should have been. By having this process where you have a recommendation and then a vote that looks like a bit of an old boys network or behind doors politicking and all that kind of stuff, opens the question of how fair that is, how many bribes may have or may not have been used, and other methods that may or may not have been used in that. I'm not saying that anything has happened, but by having it this way, you don't know what's gone on and how they've come to this decision in the end. So I think there are definitely criticisms of the process around this. I've got to feel sorry for people like Brett Gosper, especially people in World Rugby who have tried to go come up with a recommendation and then have to defend when the vote goes against it, even though they don't have any say in the vote. But even so, it is how it's ended up. So personally, I think the recommendation was wrong in the first place. I don't think they took into account the security in South Africa enough, and I think and also the fact that South Africa had pulled out of hosting the Commonwealth Games at late notice after saying they would. Now, it has been explained to me that the Commonwealth Games wasn't backed by the government, and so I understand that, yes, there are different circumstances, but there's definitely political unrest in South Africa, and you've got to wonder how that would have played out over the next, whatever it is, years to the next, to 2023. The other one, I think personally should have recommended Ireland. The other thing that I think they overweighed was there seemed to be an element of, if you haven't hosted a big tournament, you can't host a big tournament, which is a catch-22 situation, because how is Ireland going to get to host the Olympics or the FIFA World Cup? They're unlikely ever to, so that means they can never host the Rugby World Cup because they haven't hosted those big events, and that seems a tad harsh as well. So I think that was overplayed on that side of things. I think also one of the things that was said when New Zealand got the Rugby World Cup was that it was the last chance before New Zealand could host the Rugby World Cup, as it would just become too big an event for the little country to host. I think a similar thing is happening with Ireland, is that this is probably about the last time they will have the infrastructure big enough to host this, and so it's a shame they haven't won it this time, because I don't think they'll sort of be big enough to host it going forwards, and that's a shame. And so I do think there's that element of it. There have been some commentators in New Zealand saying that the recommendations and the rules around it basically rule New Zealand out of hosting the Rugby World Cup ever again. Well, yes, I think New Zealand realised that last time, that they were never going to host it again. They are too small a country. The stadium are not big enough. They cannot. Eden Park is just not big enough to host a Rugby World Cup final, and so I don't think New Zealand can ever host a Rugby World Cup again, and that the criteria from that point of view is correct. So yes, we've ended up with France. There are a whole bunch. I say the South Africans are saying, "Hey, we were recommended." It's unfair that it's suddenly gone cloak and dagger, and how do we know who's voted for who or why? The Irish are saying we would have put on a great show. It's really unfair that we haven't had an opportunity. Both those other countries have, and everyone seems to be unhappy. And I think World Rugby is one that's come out of it looking probably the worst, unfortunately, which is a shame, because they've made an effort to put in this independent review and to have a more clear reason as to why a place has been chosen, and in the end they haven't gone down. It hasn't worked out for them, and it's difficult when when World Rugby and the people who are making up that process aren't the people that are voting on it in the end, and the countries still want to have their control, even if they say, oh yes, that's a nice process, except we'll have veto. And that's what's happened here, and World Rugby has ended up with having to explain a difficult situation that's not really of their making. And so it's going to be France. For me, that's good. I'm actually in France now. It's where my parents live, so I'll have free accommodation to come over here hopefully in 2023. It's a long way off, isn't it? So maybe I'll be able to make it to some of that tournament. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously, all eyes now must turn to Japan and the preparations for that. Obviously, we have the ongoing November internationals now, which are fun to see how teams are progressing towards there. And then we'll have that tournament coming up soon. So, thank you very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below on how the Rugby World Cup 2023 has been allocated. Always up for a good old rugby chat. Don't forget to subscribe as well.